What's up? I'm Steven. I'm from LA and I am a level 3 coach for ATG. And what we're going to go over today is the method that I use to bring people from pain and achy to increasing their athletic potential where they feel confident in all of their movements. So the reason why I use this method is because it builds the body as one full unit. So when I'm working with clients from age 14 to 77, they all have different imbalances. So this method brings the body into balance. And what I call it is structural balance. It's a term coined from Charles Poliquin. And something that he said is, if you aren't making the gains that you want, the strength gains, and this is paraphrased, but if you're not making the strength gains that you want or having the ability that you want, it could be your body neurally inhibiting you to protect your structure. So you're not breaking yourself even more while you're in the gym. So with these 6 different methods of structural balance, you will be able to find a way for you to build the body that you want. So the first method, and these are split into 3 different ways. So you have the basic methods of structural balance, and then you have the 3 that are more advanced. So we'll go over the 3 basic ones first. Front to back. So this is a concept talking about tibs to calves, from quads to hamstrings, hip flexors, glutes. You got core, low back, biceps, triceps, all of these things. The body's built in tandem with each other. So when I'm working with an Irish dancer, she came to me with chronic ankle issues. The reality was that her tibs were super weak. Her calves were super strong. So when we're doing tib raises here, we're building up the front, building out balance so the joints don't have to take all of the hit. Versus the calves here, we're working the back, going all the way up, coming back down, going through. So with her ankles would constantly twist. She had weak tibs and strong calves, but she also had really tight calves. So she needed to stretch those. As we built that balance, the ankle was more relieved and she was able to dance like she wanted to. The next part of that is the upper to lower body structural balance. And this one is often missed. So when we're talking about this, it's how strong is your upper body, how strong is your lower body, and how well can they work in tandem. This is very sport specific when it comes to structural balance, because if you're trying to be a high jumper, it's a bit difficult to have you don't want a lot of upper body mass because you're trying to get up as high as you can. But you do need some upper body strength because you're trying to create propulsion from the upper body, and then all the leg force is where most of that's coming from. So something Poliquin would say is, I know that was in the greatest form, but that's not the purpose of this, is your front squat and your flat press should actually be the same weight for acceleration sports. So can you front squat all the way down comfortably and move back up, but can you also press that same weight? And most people will be a lot stronger in one, but the point is, if you bring balance to the body, you're gonna be a lot more confident and you're gonna move better. The last form of basic structural balance is side to side or left to right. The biggest imbalances I see here are with people who are doing daily routines or if they play unilateral sports. So the split squat in ATG, very popular because it works and it creates structural balance from your left to your right. Can your left leg do the same thing that your right leg can do? Is there balance there? Are the hips open? As you're going through these things, what happens is you create the balance to move better without injuries. When these things are imbalanced, the joints take over and there's more stress put through the joints. So if there's an imbalance and you're trying to play a sport, you get a lot of problems. A construction worker that I've worked with for a while, he had a bunch of elbow issues. He would always drill with one hand. So the force that his grip had to take, everything like that, became very painful. And we built out of that to build balance, one, to the other side, which was much weaker, but also recover the side that was more injured. Same thing with a baseball player. He always throws with one hand because that's his dominant hand. If we can create balance with both sides of his body, his one arm is actually going to become stronger. He's going to be able to use it better because the body works as one unit. When it's in balance, you're going to be much stronger. So now onto the advanced portions of structural balance. The first one is athletic range, which is balancing out the short to the long range strength of the muscles. We're gonna start here just to demonstrate. We got the hamstring curl. This is a short range movement. One way that normally works to tell if a movement is short versus long range is wherever the movement gets the most difficult. If it's in the short where the muscles are shortest, that's a short range movement. If it's where the muscles are the longest, it's typically a long range movement. This works for most who tell. So the hamstring curl, most difficult at the top here, and then controlling down. It's pretty easy down in here. You can kind of pulse through. So what short range does is it helps build more neural drive into the muscle, more muscle contraction, and it's really good to get out of pain. So when people have injured muscles or injured areas, high reps with short range will help build that muscle connection back up so they can activate. To contrast that, we have the Nordic. So still same movement in the knees, knee flexion, but this one, the hardest portion is actually where your body is straight. So I can do this all day. This is one of the hardest parts when we're on the hamstring curl versus the long range. We're going all the way down. This is where the movement gets the hardest. We go down, and then we're going back up. So what does long range do? It helps bulletproof the tendons and build a resilient body that's not as likely to injure. So when the short range is really strong compared to the long range, you're more likely to have a tear because you get into ranges in sports that aren't controlled. A client that I had, he came to me, extremely strong guy, but extremely strong in just the short range. His knees caused him a lot of problems. He'd had 2 knee surgeries. We've gotten him from just about a quarter half squat to a full ATG VMO squat with weight, and his knees have opened up. It took time because the tendons weren't relaxed while he was going through long range, but they also weren't strong enough. So as we built the balance, building up his long range, with short range to get blood flow, get more neural drive, which he had a lot of. We did the long range, and now he was open for the squat. His knees feel better, and he's able to move more freely with each thing that he does throughout daily life. The next form of advanced balance is tendon dominance versus muscle dominance. So when I'm doing a movement like a step up, it's a very tendon dominant movement. We're training the tendons, joint dominant movement, whatever you want to call it in that sense. As I go through this, I need to have a strong knee to be able to control down and push back up. You use the quad, but the knee is the big limiter in this movement. So when I'm working with people from age 14 to 77, there's a wide range of different dominance that I'm dealing with. As children, we're born very tendon dominant. We're very elastic. We're also very injury resilient. Kids can fall down, and typically they're not going to get hurt. As we age, we become more muscle dominant. Part of that is allowing us to do more sports and become better. If you need to accelerate, you need the strength in the muscle to move forward with the tendons. The tendons keep you moving versus the muscles start the movement. So in a sprinting sport that you start from a dead stop, the muscles have to be strong to push you forward. When we become too muscle dominant is when the tendons start to really break down. So as I said, kids were born tendon dominant, become muscle dominant. When we age and we get older, we actually become more tendon dominant once again, or we're supposed to. But if we've broken down the tendons too much before we've gotten to that point, then the joints can't hold up, but also the muscle is starting to deteriorate. It's a natural aging process that we can't move. So what I do to work with different clients is find out where they are. They have really strong muscles, but their tendons can't balance them as they go through. Are they able to go all the way down and come back up. That's something that I'm not going to do with someone whose knee is not very strong. But they also need muscle to create that force, especially if you pause in the bottom and you're sitting down here. I need the muscle to activate the tendon to get myself back up. So going back to the clients, when they come to me and their tendons are really weak compared to their muscles, because I've never heard of training tendons, they have a lot of pain, but they're strong. The aging process gets very difficult and they can't find a way to move. So what we do is we start to balance that out one step at a time of, okay, the knee needs a lot of high rep tendon work. You need to start creating more cartilage. The tendons are anabolic. Most people don't think you can train them, but anabolic means they can grow when they're put with the right amount of force. It has to be scalable. Wherever you're at is where we start, and then we just build up to that point. If you are muscle dominant, it's not a bad thing. I would be on the side of more muscle dominance when I'm jumping, when I'm doing this. I'm less elastic and I'm more about power and force. But I need to train the tendons to keep them in a sense of balance. That way I'm not getting injured. I'm not landing weird and tweaking my knee, because then that will make me not able to produce the force. So that was tendon and muscle strength. And now we're on to the last form of structural balance, which is software versus hardware dominance. So software is how much force you can use out of your muscles. Hardware is the actual meat on the bones. How much tendon, how much muscle do you have? It's a very simple way of describing it. But here's the reality. If you're very software dominant, which most athletes tend to be because they don't spend enough time actually training up the hardware, you're at a higher injury risk because your computing system is stronger than the actual meat that you use to fire the computing system. So you can jump higher than you can really control and down on the landing. And then the hardware, for example, when we're building that up, what happens if it's too dominant compared to the software is that you might just not be able to use your maximal amount of strength that you could. But it's better to be hardware dominant and then build the software than be software dominant and have no hardware, because you're going to need the hardware to compute with the software for long terms. The best analogy I have to describe this is if you had an iPhone 4 and an iPhone 15. The iPhone 15, if you try to download all of the software into the hardware of the iPhone 4, the phone wouldn't work. It wouldn't be able to compute, wouldn't be able to function. But if you tried to download the iPhone 4 into the iPhone 15, the phone should still work because the hardware has been upgraded so much. It's just computing at a lower level than it's possible. So if you are in that area and you have really high software but no hardware to manage, you're at a very high injury risk. Versus in contrast, if you have high amounts of hardware and the software is very low, then you just have a lot of potential into your future to work. The hardware is very much trainable versus the software. You can only get to a certain amount. So when it comes to sports, this is all very sport specific. So anything that I talked about in this balance all depends on your sport. If you're trying to be a sprinter versus a rugby player or a soccer player, all of these are going to take different balance in your body to be the best at your sport. So it becomes very specific to what you want. And that also goes for longevity. If you want to just be the healthiest you can be and move the best you can, it takes a different type of balance than if you're trying to be an elite level athlete. So this is why having a coach is so important, because if you don't necessarily know where you're imbalanced or where you want your balance to be, it can be difficult for you to have the correct program to build the body that you want. So for example, there was a client that I had who had neuropathy, which is technically, it's not curable, it's just manageable. And after working with him, he needed more hardware in his body. He was very low in hardware. So we created that balance that he could then move better. And he said it was about 6 months that his neuropathy was better about 80% of the pain that he had beforehand to where he was after. So that's just one example, and there was many others in the video of when we can create the balance, you get the results that you want. So ATG is the method of exercise selection, of all these different ways of thinking of exercise to build the balance in your body that creates the opportunities you want to have in your future.